So with that, it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Matthew Sherburne, our faculty speaker for today. And I will try to facilitate the Q&A and share questions as we feel in need, but I will hand it over to you, Matt. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Just a couple quick things. I think the Society of Women Engineers do a wonderful job on all of their events. So attending that is wonderful. I know Scott Mora very well, and he does a wonderful job with engineering science. So if you're at all interested in that, take the time to hear what Scott has to say. And so I stuck in the chat, which I think you can see, I stuck my email. So if you have questions later on, you should feel free to reach out to me. Although don't expect, sometimes the response will have to wait till the weekend. And so why do they ask me to come talk to you? Well, I am you. I am, some time frame pushed along ahead of you, but I went to American River Community College up in Sacramento. I had a career. I decided to go back to school. And so the nearest JC to me was American River College. So I'd go take classes in the morning, and then I would go to work and then go home and do my homework, right? And study in the evening. And so I actually started out a business major, got pulled into an engineering project, and got talked into changing into mechanical engineering. Then I took Engineering 45, or Introduction to Material Science, and I decided I liked both mechanical engineering and material science. And so I wanted to double major. So I applied to 3 colleges out of from American River College. I applied to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, Berkeley, and Penn State, all of who had double major programs at the time. I was accepted at all of them. You might say one of these is not like the other, right? Being Penn State. Well, I had started growing up at Penn State. My dad was in the geophysics department when I was a little kid before we moved out to California, and he took a job with the state chasing earthquakes, seismologist. And so I applied, was accepted at all of those. I went and visited Cal Poly with a bunch of friends from American River who also got accepted, and had lots of friends that were at Cal Poly. And I went and talked to the chair of material science, and the conversation went something like this: don't do the double major, don't do the double major, don't do that. For the love of God, don't do the double major. I went and talked to the mechanical engineering faculty member, got the same response. Had a phone call with Penn State, and they were really great and open about the double major, and they had it built into the system. And when I drove back from the visit to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, this was long enough ago that I had an envelope waiting for me on my kitchen table, the big, 8.5 by 11 envelope, not the short letter or the small letter envelope. And so at the time, if you got the big envelope, that means you got admitted, because they had to spend more money sending it to you. And so I got admitted to the double degree program at Berkeley in mechanical engineering. So the fact that many of you are mechanical engineers, I went through the curriculum, right? Many of my friends are faculty in mechanical engineering here. So I just sat on a Ph.D. qualifying exam with the chair of mechanical engineering. So I can probably answer at least some of your questions about mechanical engineering. And I came to visit Berkeley, and I'll be honest, my father, who was a researcher, warned me that going to a big research university, I wouldn't get personal attention that I would at, say, Cal Poly. But I was like, all right, well, let's go visit anyway. And I came and visited, and the faculty here, like I met with the chair of material science, who at the time was Ron Gronsky. And he goes, oh, the double major is great. Here's the benefits to it. Here's what you get from mechanical, and just talked me through it and said, it's going to be hard work, but, we set it up specifically for people that have these cross-cutting interests. And I went talked to George Johnson in mechanical engineering, who was the undergraduate advisor, and essentially got the same thing. I met with student groups here, and everybody was open and helpful. And, it was not like my father had experienced. And my father has a story about when he sat in his chemistry class as an undergrad, the professor said, look to your right, look to your left, one of you will not be here at the end of the semester. And that's not the way Berkeley was. It was, the classes are going to be hard, but we're going to help you. And so I ended up deciding to transfer into Berkeley as a double major in material science and mechanical engineering, thinking I was going to be a mechanical engineer who knew a lot about material science. Well, I started taking my upper division material science courses, and I quickly realized I was actually a material scientist who just liked design and liked being able to build things. And so I ended up, all of my electives in mechanical were focused on how to calculate and understand material properties. And so I ended up really focusing on material science. I went and spoke to a professor in material science about research and just said, hey, I don't know anything about research, but I'd like to give it a shot. And he was like, okay, come sit down, talk to me. What classes have you taken? What do you, and so we just talked. And he's like, okay, I've got an opening in a program, this is what it would be. Do you want it? I said, okay. Now I'll say this was not my first semester that I went and talked to faculty. My first semester, I actually got 2 C's, right? It transferring from American River to Berkeley, the pace is substantially faster. And this is, my father knew this, having gone through this, and I didn't really listen to him. But he said it was going to be much faster, but he warned about the cutthroat nature of a research university. So he was 50% right. The pace was much, much faster. But with the transfer center here, I immediately fell into, groups of other transfer students. And then in my classes, I immediately, and lifelong friends, but immediately got into study groups with people. Nobody had a problem as long as I was doing the best I could. Everybody was willing to help me. And so once I settled down in the coursework after my first semester, about halfway through the second semester, I went and asked a professor about research, got a research position, ended up really liking research, and continued researching throughout my time at Berkeley. And then I applied for grad school. And I ended up applying to all California schools, and ended up coming down between Stanford and Berkeley. And so the professor at Stanford that I really wanted to work for was going to retire, and told me such, and said, look, if you want to come and essentially work on your own. I'm happy to have you as a PhD student. I decided that wasn't the way I wanted to do my PhD. I wanted to be much more collaborative and in contact with my advisor. So I ended up staying at Berkeley and getting my PhD. When I finished my PhD, the economy tanked. I had applied for faculty positions, and it actually was on the verge of getting offers at several Cal States, one including Cal State Sacramento. But like the dean of the college up at Sac State actually called me and said, look, I'm not going to hire you. We want to hire you. We all think you're the person. But if I hire you and I get the budget cut I'm expecting, I'm going to have to lay somebody off. Well, it was at that point that a friend of mine reached out and said, look, we're looking for a faculty member at University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. Why don't you apply? Dumb luck has it, I applied and I got a position at the material science department at Urbana-Champaign. While I was a grad student, so this is one of the great things about Berkeley, you have lots and lots and lots of opportunities. As an engineering and a hard science person, you would have opportunities to engage with and do research at the National Lab, which is right behind campus. So I held a dual position when I was a undergrad and grad student, and actually now, where I have a position on campus, but I also have a position up at the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, which offers us resources that just other campuses do not have access to. And so while I was here as a grad student, I had helped start what would become our sustainable energy research effort in Singapore. So this was a large research center funded at about $6 million a year for 5 years. And so I was a grad student during this. Everybody else was faculty members, but I really was involved. And if you look at the initial proposal, my name is one of the 10 names on it from Berkeley. And so Illinois liked that. Illinois liked my involvement with national labs. They liked my research. They liked my passion for teaching. So they hired me. I was at Illinois 2 years when the research effort in Singapore didn't start right away. And so that's why Berkeley couldn't keep me. That's why I was looking for jobs. That's how I ended up at UIUC. And then about a year and a half later, about a year later, the funding came through for the research center. The person that was going to run it after I had left campus to become associate lab director at a different national lab. And the person that was put in charge of it went to the dean and went to the chair of the material science department and asked if they could bring me back. And so my first summer in Illinois was actually spent in Singapore, helping the Berkeley lead start the program. And then my second summer, I spent the whole summer in Singapore. And then after my second year at Urbana-Champaign, I ended up getting hired and moved back to Berkeley to run the research center. And so I would spend the fall semester in Berkeley and the spring semester and summer in Singapore. And so I ran, a $6 million a year, $5 or $6 million a year, depends on the individual year, research center. And we still have a big effort in Singapore. Out of that research center, I had 2 other programs that were spun out and were funded for research in Singapore. I just spent the whole summer in Singapore. Next month, I'll be going to the Philippines to start a new research program and big funding effort with them. I was just in Indonesia. And so with all of these experiences, particularly Singapore and the Philippines, I had started helping the international development people here on campus, and in particular in the College of Engineering. And so when Anthony St. George, the director of international engagement for the college, retired in December 2019, the dean, she appointed me as the new director of our international engagement. And so I am it's a spectacular job. The downside of it is that it means my day's kind of 24 hours because, and it's kind of 7 days a week because different places have different weeks. You know, some places, Saturday, Sunday aren't the days off. Sunday's a regular work day. And so they'll want to schedule calls on Sunday, which are my Saturday. Or I have to get up at 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. to take calls from Asia. But the exciting thing is I get to do this and I get to travel. And so all of this, right? I should say none of what I've accomplished or well accomplished would I have been able to do without the experience at AR, right? American River College got me into engineering. It prepared me ridiculously well with the foundations that I needed. And then it just took me a little while to pick up how fast and I needed to learn once I got to Berkeley. But once I got to Berkeley, I found effectively infinite levels of help and students and faculty and staff and tutoring centers that offered me opportunities to succeed, be successful, and branch out and explore things I never thought I would have explored while I was, taking Physics 7A at American River College or taking my Introductions to Circuits class there, right? I had no idea how vast the opportunities were. And so, so I think my main advice over everything is to, every class you take, really, really try and get down into the basics. So I had started out, your career will not be fixed on one thing and one thing only, and you mastering that one skill will be sufficient anymore. It used to be that you could do that in engineering and science, but everything changes so rapidly now. And so, for example, everybody here is an engineer. You've probably taken first semester physics, and you have probably seen F equals MA. Well, it turns out I have PhD students solving F equals MA, right? And there's a whole field called molecular dynamics, which is fundamentally solving F equals MA. Mechanical engineers use it, nuclear engineers use it, material scientists use it, physicists use it, chemists use it, and it all comes back to F equals MA. Turns out I was a metals person as a mechanical properties person as a PhD student. Now I do virtually no mechanical properties, although starting to get back into it. I do lots and lots of organic chemistry now. Lots of surfaces, lots of catalysts for energy, sustainability, environmental remediation, water purification, right? I did not think I would be going back to the organic chemistry that I took at American River College. I do it daily now, right? So you have no idea where your career is going to go. And one of the wonderful things about Berkeley that I've already mentioned, but that I don't think I can stress enough is all of the different opportunities that you have. Every department is, okay, not every, almost every department in the College of Engineering is ranked top 10 and actually top 5. We have one that is ranked number 16 in the nation. But that's kind of unfair because we just accepted our first class of aerospace engineers. So literally the first class of aerospace engineers are taking my intro to material science this semester. Their first semester freshmen, they're taking my class, and everybody expects the program to be important enough that it's already ranked number 16. And we're going to hire many more faculty for it. And so all of these rich departments offer you opportunities that you didn't know existed. And the field is incredibly broad, whatever discipline you're interested in. And when you get here, try everything you possibly can to narrow that down into what you're will end up truly being interested in. And so did you ever have imposter syndrome? So I'm just so if you have questions, throw them in here. I'm going to answer them. Did you ever have imposter syndrome? Hell, I've got imposter syndrome regularly. Right. I walk into a room with my colleagues, and these are some of the most brilliant people on earth. Okay. Like one of my colleagues, okay, he just left to become vice president at another university for research. But this is a guy, it turns out you can bet on anything in England. If you look at the physics Nobel Prize list that they put betting odds on, he's on there, right? We were starting up a new collaboration with a university in China, right? And the next thing you know, I'm starting to get regular emails from somebody I had never met on campus. And it's like, hey, Matt, heard you're doing this. I'm on the university advisory board for starting the new university. Here's what we want to do. We should have a quick call. Appreciate all your efforts on helping us do this. Cheers, Randy. I'm like, oh, okay, Randy. What a nice guy. I go look up Randy. It's Randy Sheckman. He's a Nobel Prize winner. So when I walk around and I'm interacting with all of these people that have been insanely successful, if you're not a little bit dubious about your own qualifications, I would think that, you're maybe a little bit too arrogant. Now, if, Randy Sheckman comes and talks to me about my specific area of research that he doesn't do, sure, I think I know more than him. But, there's lots and lots of really, really smart people. And I will tell you, I have talked to lots of faculty members, and I will tell you that most of them have said that they have, imposter syndrome, maybe not often now, but even still, they're like going, yeah, am I really doing this? Should I really be doing this? So yeah, it does happen. And so I just threw myself into the study groups and, was willing to work as hard, if not harder than anybody else, and realized I was going to have to take some lumps on the way. Do you have any advice specifically for transfer students looking to get into research? Okay, so yes. Perfect. Thank you. Good luck. I expect you to bring back, top 3. Sorry, I just had a student taking an exam who runs for the track and field team, and the Pac-12 championships are this weekend. And so he can't take the exam Thursday. So he was just dropping it off. Yeah, so research. I would say don't try and get into research your first semester. It is, so when I transferred, the way I think of this, and I don't know if anybody else ever did this, but when I was a little kid, I would run around outside all summer, play basketball, football, whatever me and my friends were playing. We'd run up to the house and turn on the hose, right? And we'd drink directly from the hose. That's really what high school and community college are. They're drinking from the hose. You can't shove it in your mouth. It's coming out too fast. Well, when I got to Berkeley, I kind of, the content was coming at me so fast. It was kind of like drinking from a fire hose, right? And it was really coming fast. So the first semester was tough. And I've got transfer students in my class this semester, right? And they're experiencing this. And so they come talk to me and, I help them as much as I can, right? In any way I can. But the first semester, I wouldn't try and do research. After you do research, or after you get through that first semester and you've settled in and you kind of go, okay, I now know how hard I have to work. I now know how to budget my time. I have 10 hours a week I could dedicate to research. Then you can go talk to somebody about research. Look at the web pages, figure out what area you might be interested in, and the best way to do this is go knock on the doors. I have never met a faculty member. Okay, well, there's a caveat to this, but I've never met an active research faculty member who does not want undergrads in their group. I've met people that have essentially retired and have one grad student or one postdoc or something. They're essentially retired. They may not want an undergrad. Anybody that is active wants an undergrad, wants as many undergrads as they can get. The best way to get a research position, sure, you should send an email, introduce yourself, say, hey, I've read this from your website. I think this is really interesting. But ultimately, go knock on the door. Find out when their office hours are. Go knock on the door. Professor Smith, I'm really interested in your work. Do you have any time to talk about it now? I'm interested in joining your research group, right? And they're going to be honest. They're going to say, oh, yes, we actually have an opening, or I don't know, let me reach out to my grad students, because in general, you take one undergrad for every grad student or postdoc you have. So if you have a group of 10 grad students and postdocs, you can kind of run a group of 10 undergrads, right? And just go talk to them. They might not have space, right? Like, I was really foolish last year. I ended up having like 2 undergrads for every grad student and postdoc. And that became really tough to manage just with my time and making sure the undergrads had sufficient access to me. So yeah, I think research is a great opportunity. Look, while you're at the community college, there's a thing called REUs, Research Experience for Undergrads. These are sponsored by the National Science Foundation, and they are all over the country in all kinds of different topics: chemistry, physics, material science, mechanical, you pick it, bioengineering. They have something in that area. So if you search REU NSF, you will find research opportunities. These are summer opportunities. They will pay your travel. You will get a stipend, right? And they will put you in a research lab to, do whatever you're interested in doing and what they're hiring you to do. There's also tends to be a whole development program. So you may get to hear famous scientists speak. You may be near some local historical sites and they'll take you on field trips there, right? There'll be probably programs about how to make posters, how to make presentations, right? And so there'll be a professional development component to this. all of these programs like taking community college students. So if you're interested in research, you can do this and participate in this while you're at the community college, right? It's over the summer if you're not taking classes, right? And you're interested in research, search REU NSF sites and you will get a huge list. And then you can break them down by sections or topics and then figure out what ones you're interested in and then apply to them. So any advice? Okay, so I think that takes care of the research. What was my community college GPA transferring to UC Berkeley? Oh God, that was a while ago. I'm gonna say it was not perfect. So it was probably, and it was a lot more A's than B's. So probably somewhere around 3.7, 3.8 when I transferred. So in general, we don't, at least, so we as a department get a little bit of say in the transfer. If you have extracurriculars, if you've done summer REUs, if you've done other things, that certainly is looked favorably on. The extracurriculars, you know, if they're related to education, are better than other things on average. So tutoring, research, you know, these types of things. I did not have a huge number of extracurriculars, mainly because I was working full time and I had actually owned a business at the time. And so I didn't have like this pile of extracurricular activities. And I had not done any research. How much priority is given on research? I don't think much priority. Look, it looks good, but ultimately what we're concerned about is that you're going to be able to come here and excel. And so certainly showing research or having research experience or tutoring or these other things show a desire to expand your education and become better educated. And so I don't, you know, so again, I did not have any research experience when I applied. Most of the, if not all, not all, but most of the transfer students don't have research experience. So I do not think it's a big predictor on whether you get admitted to Berkeley transferring in. Would it be worth my time to take a lot of challenging courses and not focus so much on research? Well, if you're at the community college, right, you're gonna have to finish up most of the lower division requirements, right? So I actually applied for fall admission, but I was gonna end up, if I transferred to Berkeley in the fall, I would have ended up having 4 lower division classes to finish. So they admitted me, but they admitted me for the spring. And so I ended up staying at American River 1 additional fall. And I ended up taking, what was it? I knew I took linear algebra. Maybe it was physics 7C. And there was another class I was taking. And I didn't take computer, I didn't take my programming class. I took my programming class at Berkeley. Just because, you know, you heard all about CS. And so I was like, oh, it's the #1 CS department. I'll take my programming at Berkeley. And so I took the standard curriculum. I didn't go, you know, I guess I went beyond with organic chemistry. Because I didn't need that specifically for material science or mechanical engineering, but I didn't take a huge number of like exotic classes or anything, and I didn't do research, right? I wrote a compelling letter, right, statement about why I wanted to go to Berkeley, why I was going after engineering, and I could talk about how I had evolved. I think the statement was more impactful. Well, it was certainly more impactful than research or, taking exotic classes or really challenging classes other than the core engineering curriculum. Let's see. So I'm also at American River. Oh, well, if you know Kristen Casali, tell her I said hi. I was her first TA for Chem 1A, her first year at American River. Also, Minerva Moreno was the one that taught me E45 and got me started down the material science track. Programs you use there. So at American River College, I don't know if they still have it. I was a beacon tutor, which actually meant you were much more a TA to the faculty. And you held small group discussions. So I had a group of, I think, 8 students for Chem 1A that I was helping. I tutored out of the tutoring center. I got to tell you, tutoring was one of the best ways that I became good at topics in engineering, right? Teaching somebody else stuff forced you to really learn. Those were really at AR, it was my involvement in tutoring. And then at the time, we ran a human powered vehicle competition. And if you go in the library, I think one of the vehicles, at least at one point, was hung up in the library. We ended up taking second, and ended up, second and third 2 years, and then ended up winning 1 year. We took 2 vehicles and we won one category and took, I think, third in the other category. And it was the engineering project that ASME was running that got me into engineering. So I used to race bikes and own a bike shop, and turned out the president of the ASME club, American Society for Mechanical Engineers, would race me in his car and I'd be riding my bike. And I never knew he was racing me, and I beat him every time to campus. And so he ended up hunting me down and asking me to ride their human powered vehicle for them. And so, yeah, that's actually how I got into engineering, was that the ASME club at AR ran the human powered vehicle competition. So I think any club activity, ASME stuff, if that's still happening at American River, that's a great thing to be involved in. And then I just thought tutoring was an incredible opportunity for me to learn everything much better. Let's see. If a student wants to put together an academic research conference for community college students, let's say at Berkeley. Yeah, so if you want to do something like that, my email's in the chat. And you can send me an email, and we can help you do that. Right. I think we would be happy to host something like that, and we'd have to work on the details, but yeah. Matter of fact, I'm trying to put together one for the Ceramic Society now. And I was just exchanging emails with Tiffany Reardon, who's from the Engineering Student Services, about hosting the Engineering Liaison Council meeting here in the spring. Then that's where all of the community colleges, and that's how I know folks at Mount San Antonio and all the other community colleges that have engineering, was we bring folks from all the community colleges together with folks from the UC and state schools. And it's really, the 2 big ones are UCLA and UC Berkeley that participate in this. And try and figure out ways we can participate, try and make sure that the pathways to transferring are as easy as we can possibly make them. So yeah, we do stuff with the community colleges all the time. And yeah, I would be happy to, we could try and figure out how to help do this. Aside from study groups and adjusting to the pace, are there any tips you would, so tips for transfer for study habits? Okay, so I just had a student in my office, and talking, because didn't do great on the first midterm, so it was talking to me about the how to do better. And I actually have my old notes from classes I took, so I pulled out my old notes and I showed him, and you could see where I had written the notes, in pencil, and generally one color pen, maybe two. But then I would go back over my notes and I would read the notes, and I would make notes on my notes in my notes and make sure I understood everything. And like, I could show him, I go, yeah, here's all the text. And then here's my notes in the margin, explaining to myself what I think I understood there. And then like, there was a whole section where I just put a bracket and I had a question mark. I was like, well, so then I would go see the professor during office hours and I would walk through my notes with the professor. And I gotta tell you, it is a little time consuming, but it was incredibly effective. The other thing I do is I would sit there and I would tear apart every equation. And I would be the slowest person in my study group, like at AR, my friend Rob, we would get together in his kitchen, there'd be 5 or 6 of us, and everybody'd be off solving the problems. Oh yeah, here's what, and the first 3 or 4 problems are kind of easy, and then they get progressively harder. Well, I wouldn't be able to solve the first problem because I'd be so busy trying to understand the equations and understand every last little thing. And I'd go so far as I'd write, okay, well, D, the units on D are meters squared per second. If you take diffusion, you'll understand what that means. And I would go through everything in the equation like that. And then I would sit there and go, okay, let's look at problem 1. And then I would sit there and go, oh, this is what's happening here. This is how this works. This is how that works. And so then it was funny because then while they were all stalled, I'd be like, okay, there's problem 2, there's problem, and I get up to problem 4 where they were stalled. I'd look at it and I'd start fiddling with it and I'd be like, oh yeah, okay, I got it. Yeah. And then Rob would just look at it and goes, oh yeah, there goes Matt speeding by us. And it's just because I took I wasn't too concerned about solving the problem. I was concerned about really understanding what the equations meant physically, right? And if I'm going to understand them physically, that's meant I had to understand the units. And so I think those would be the 2 big things, other than just getting in study groups and whatnot. But the study groups were hugely helpful. And I got to tell you, I just sent actually a gag gift to one of, literally right before I logged on to this, because it's her birthday, Friday. And so I sent her a 1-pound bag of cherry gummy bears because she always liked the red gummy bears. And so these are friends from my study group to this day that we all send stupid stuff to each other on birthdays, or at least send emails to each other and whatnot. So study groups are spectacular. Since I'm interested in doing research and pursuing grad school, what qualities in a program, college should I look for when I apply to them? Well, so there are certainly colleges. So I served on graduate admissions for PhD admissions for 8 years, and I was co-chair for 3, just stepping down this year. Stepping down from PhD, and I am the chair and sole person on the master's admissions committee for the department. It's just, but even stepping away from PhD means I probably get about 80 to 100 hours back because I won't be reviewing applications. So I do know something about pursuing grad school. The sad truth is most of the best graduate school applicants come from some small subset of universities, right? Berkeley being one of them, the UCs in general being very good. They look very good on a resume. Cal Poly San Luis Obispo is not a bad place. But the others being typical MIT, Northwestern, University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, Stanford, Caltech, UT Austin is okay, right? Penn State is okay. So if you look, don't take this overly serious, but we get students from the major schools that apply. We know what their education has been. We generally have faculty that have done undergrad there or have spent time somewhere or have friends there. And so we know what we're getting from a student that has attended one of these schools. Whereas we get students that apply from, okay, so for example, we had a student apply that was, and got admitted, that's why I'm okay telling you this, but from Troy University. So the question is to yourself, have you ever heard of Troy University in Alabama before? Probably not, right? I knew it existed, but we had never had somebody apply from there. And so we spent a lot of time going over that and really, really considering that carefully. We get students from, University of Wisconsin, that's not Madison. And so you might not know anything about that. We had students apply from ITB, which is Institute of Technology Bandung in Indonesia. And none of us knew anything about that. I knew from my time in Singapore that it was the top technical school in Indonesia, but that was all I knew. So we reviewed the applicants and we discussed it as a group, and we ended up saying, we don't know anything about this. The students look good. Why don't we have an interview with the students? Let's kind of test our logic here. And it turns out those two students are starting their second year and they are doing spectacular work. So getting accepted to grad school is a function of your GPA. And so if you have a good GPA from a solid undergraduate institution, say like Berkeley, since I'm sitting on campus here, everybody in the nation knows what that means, right? They know that MSE has for example, MSE has a GPA average of about 3.2, somewhere between 3.2, 3.3, right? And so if you're graduating with a 3.7, everybody knows exactly what that means. I'm not sure I know what a 4.0 from Georgia Tech means, right? We literally had 5 students apply last year that had 4.0s from Georgia Tech. And so I'm actually going to call my friend who's a professor at Georgia Tech and talk to him and say, okay, what's going on here? Was this just an unusual year? Are you guys getting lots of grade inflation? Right? And so your GPA matters because we want to know that you're going to be able to handle the core graduate coursework. Then your letters of recommendation, you need to get 3 letters of recommendation. 2 of them should be from research staff, faculty, That's why I'd recommend going and trying to get, if you're interested, if you think you want to go to grad school and you think you're interested in research, places want students from the community colleges at their REUs, apply. You go there, you spend 3 months there, you do really good there, you work really hard, right? You show that you're willing to work, you show that you're, you've got some talent, a little bit of talent at research. You can get a beautiful letter of recommendation from these summer programs. And that means you say you transfer to Berkeley and you work for one professor here and that professor thinks you're great. They can write you a beautiful letter of recommendation. Okay, so that's 2 research letters. And I just got an email last night from a student that has taken 2 undergrad classes from me, hasn't done any research from me or with me, and said, would you write me a letter of recommendation? I was like, absolutely. Are your other 2 letters from research people? Because I can only talk about you in terms of your ability to learn and dedication and these types of things that are related to coursework, not to research, which is what somebody's hiring you to do. They say, yeah, I got the research letters. I was like, okay. Then it is your statements of purpose, right? And that is about how you've grown, about what you want to do for research, right? And we're holding well, heck, we held one 2 weeks ago, and I'm going to hold another one, I think next week, for students about what they should write. And so those will all come kind of your first semester of your senior year when you have to write them, and you'll actually have experience in research, and you'll have a much better idea what to write. That's really what gets you admitted. So where you go to school matters in the fact that we can calibrate the GPA and we have some idea what the letters of recommendation are measured against, right? So yeah, it is 1 o'clock. I have time, so I don't have to go anywhere and I can keep talking. I think our co-host has to take off to a meeting, and so there's still 27 attendees. I'm happy to stay here and answer some more questions. I wish you could unmute and just ask them. That's more fun. But so let's see. Do you think Cal Poly San Luis Obispo is as good as a second option for engineering? Yeah, Cal Poly SLO is a good school, right? I really considered going there. It is really, really, really hands-on, right? So every class you take has a lab. Not every class you take here, okay, that's a bit of an exaggeration, but they have lots and lots and lots of labs. Not every class you take at Berkeley or UCLA or any of the research universities has a lab associated with it. There are several reasons for that. One, we tend to be, I guess, a bit arrogant. We tend to think our students are pretty bright and we don't need labs for everything. We do have, like in our curriculum, we have 4 labs. But the other thing is that we're a research university. We spend lots of time on that. And if you get into research, you will spend lots and lots of time in the lab, developing lab skills, developing techniques, right? The other thing is maybe you want to go to industry. So we spend lots and lots of time developing industrial connections to get you internships. And so many of our students come, they think they want to do research, they do an internship, and they go, oh, wait a minute, I really want to go to industry. And so then we gear them up for going to industry. And so if we have labs in every class, like SLO does, or at least when I applied there, it ends up chewing up a lot of the students' time and really reducing the opportunities for them to participate in things outside coursework. And so I'm a big believer that we kill ourselves to try and give as many opportunities as we possibly can to students to do things extracurricularly outside the class or with companies or what have you. And that is a more rewarding experience than just another lab that you have to get through for a class, right? Okay, so did you directly pursue PhD after completing your bachelor's? I did. Well, okay. So if you know you want to get a PhD, you apply for a PhD. And along the way to my PhD, I got a master's, right? So if you already have a master's degree, you get admitted to a PhD program only. If you don't have a master's, you tend to get admitted to a master's PhD program. And it turns out once you have your PhD, nobody cares about your master's. Nobody has ever asked me if I had a master's. People will ask me where I got my bachelor's degree from, what my bachelor's degree is in, and then they'll ask me about my PhD. Nobody ever asked me about my master's degree. But that being said, we get students that all the time. So it's okay. So we get a fair number of PhD applicants from Korea. And a common approach in Korea, and this is common here also, but not as common. The student in Korea may not be at one of the big 3 universities in Korea. And so what they'll do is they'll get their bachelor's from the lesser known university. Then they may transfer to Seoul National or KAIST University for their master's. They'll get their master's there and do great in research and get papers published and have glowing letters of recommendation. And then they'll apply to Berkeley for their PhD. So we do get a number of students that are attempting to come in with a master's, and that's totally fine. It's not abnormal at all. So this just has to do with, I guess, in some sense, kind of gaming the system to a small degree, right? What's going to be best for you to get the best degree possible? Now, that's not saying Berkeley or MIT is going to be the best for everybody, right? I had Peter, who worked for me as a freshman, came in as a freshman, worked for me, thought that was great, but went and tried other things like I suggest undergrads do. And he ended up coming down, choosing between Northwestern for his PhD or Virginia. Well, most people don't think of Virginia as a huge place to get your PhD from in engineering. Well, it turns out in corrosion engineering, they're very good. They have 3 or 4 excellent faculty, right? The rest of the material science program, I'm like, But Peter's like, I want to study corrosion. And I was like, okay, well, they have lots of contacts to people in industry, people in the Defense Department, right? There are 3 or 4 faculty members that work in the area you're interested in. Whereas if you go to Northwestern, there is only 1 person. And he's like, I should go to Virginia. I was like, yeah, if you're absolutely sure you want to go to corrosion and do corrosion, choosing between Northwestern and Virginia, it's a no-brainer to go to Virginia, even though it's not as highly ranked. Because once you get there and get your PhD, you're always that advisor's student. There was a very famous scientist that I was on a call with, and we were all just kibitzing, and he was laughing because his advisor was even more famous. And so somebody came up to at a conference, was like, oh, and I forget the advisor's name, but oh, you were Professor Smith's student. And, here's a guy, 65 years old, National Academy member, done wonderful in the science career. And he was still being introduced as so-and-so's student, because that's who he got his PhD with. And so for Peter, going and working for these folks in corrosion, that's their forte, and that's really what the department does, and all they do, that made a lot of sense, right? Okay, so if my ECs are mostly entrepreneurial, starting, oh yeah, right. Okay, so if you want to be entrepreneurial, this is spectacular. We have a entrepreneurship center, Satarja Center for Entrepreneurship and Technology, SCET. We've got a whole program for undergraduate students. And so, yeah, I would, in my statement, I would write that up. Berkeley is huge in entrepreneurship. The College of Engineering, the Vice Chancellor of Research, and the Haas School of Business each put up a third of money for, I think it was about 6 years, which was roughly, it came out to about $4 million, I think, or $5 million, to start our own campus incubator called Skydeck. We just started in the Baker Institute for Biosciences, which has an incubator for biotechnology and biosciences in it. We have multiple smaller incubators on campus. The National Lab, sorry, I'm pointing because up the hill is the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, and they have an incubator that's focused on energy, right? So yeah, I would, if you've raised revenue or made revenue and gotten funding to start the company, yes, you should absolutely write that up, right? Again, we just, well, okay, it's like in its 4th year now. I developed the curriculum for MSc, but we have a management of engineering and technology program. It's a double major where the students are admitted in their first year into an engineering discipline, so like material science, mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, what have you, and the Haas Business School. So these students get 2 degrees by the time they finish. We think engineering is becoming so coupled with business and having an aptitude in business, right? So no, that will not hurt your application. I would think it would help your application as much as having, research experience. So yeah, I would certainly, when you write your statement, I would write about how these opportunities at Berkeley, send me an email or just look up entrepreneurship at UC Berkeley or SCET or Skydeck, right? And that will lead you to all these other things that you can find. And so I absolutely would write that up. Would Berkeley professors consider community college students to participate in research? If so, do you have any guidance to reaching out to them other than cold calling them? So yes, I know faculty that have done this. I would be interested, except I'm just so damn busy right now. I've actually so busy, I'm talking to the chair about teaching less because my college responsibilities, which would actually, the teaching less would give me more time to be involved in research and take more undergrads. So cold emailing them, if you're near the campus, actually stopping by and just seeing the professor is a good thing. So one of my colleagues, I know a student stopped by, talked to them, and they ended up putting them on a project. I forget what community college, they were from the South Bay. And I know now this is kind of home field advantage, but there was a student at Berkeley, the community college here, that came up and got a position with somebody in mechanical engineering. So if you can't stop by, cold emailing at least a couple times and then maybe calling them. Yeah, there's not a better way. Sorry. I wish I had some, golden ticket advice to give to you there. So calculus grades, right? How important are they? At least moderately important. But it is your overall GPA, but it's a competitive process, right? And so I look at this as a sliding scale. All these things it's a, comprehensive review process. But if you take, 3 semesters of calculus, a semester of differential equations, and you get all C's, but then in all of your English classes and history classes, you're getting all A pluses. Is that going to be a competitive application versus somebody that got all A's in calculus for engineering and got B's in their humanities, right? We're probably going to go with somebody that got the A's in the calculus. But now, if you're talking about getting B's and B pluses in calculus, are you competitive? Yeah. Right. So it's not just, it's what your grades are, but also it's what the pool of applicants looks like. And so certainly your calculus, your physics, your chemistry, that's what we're going to care most about in engineering, because those are the classes that really help predict whether you're going to be successful in our curriculum. Yeah. So, okay. So if we earn our degree abroad, is it harder to be admitted to a Berkeley PhD program? Again, so most of us travel the world and give talks and engage. And so I've got active collaborations with people in Singapore, the Philippines, not Indonesia yet, about to get one in Indonesia, France, India. I'm looking at the map above me. There's other places in the US. And England, right? So, so that's with Cambridge and places like that. So we know most of the good schools in most of the countries in our disciplines. So getting a degree abroad isn't a big deal, because the same rules abroad apply, I guess, even stricter than they do to the US schools. Meaning that, right, I just talked about, and I gave the example of Troy University in Alabama versus MIT. Well, if you're, just say you go to China and you go to Tsinghua, okay, well, that's the best engineering school in China. Yeah, we know that, right? But if you go to some third-tier Chinese school, we're probably not going to know that. We're probably not going to, know much about it. This is actually why we always have a Chinese faculty member on the committee. So they can guide us, right? But odds are, right, if you're from a much lower tier school abroad, it does make it tougher, right? But if you're from one of the brand names abroad, we all know them and we all respect them, and you're just as likely to be admitted as if you were from one of the top US schools. And again, I guess I haven't said this, but on average, our PhD programs, it's about 50% international, right? So let's see, does the grad school department get high number of applications from? Yeah, so we get IIT. I just had a meeting with folks from IIT Mandy, which is one of the newer ones. I really want to go visit it after they showed me the drone photo. It literally is nestled up against the Himalaya mountains. And the spine of the mountain comes down, and essentially where it ends, the campus is on two sides of it. It was one of the coolest looking campuses I've ever seen. Now this was from a drone, so I didn't get down to see the, nuts and bolts of the campus, but just the location. And then, so yeah, we get them from the typical, so we get lots of students that apply from India, and we always accept some every year. Is that available to transfer students? Sorry, I'm not sure sorry, Justin, if you're still there, if you just tell me what I was referring to when you said that. Let's see. And so I haven't an academy with NASA. Oh, nice. Designing a preliminary design review document. Okay, mission observing a near asteroid. Yeah, so I would certainly put that right. So you're doing a project with NASA, right? I would absolutely put that in with your application, right? When you write up your statement, right? I would write up that what this experience has taught you and where it has impacted your research interest. Now, it's okay that it's different than your research, right? It certainly shows that you're interested, you're engaged, you're willing to outreach, right? And do stuff that's outside what you're specifically interested in. And so, yeah, I absolutely figure out a way to write that in there. And I'll point out that campus here, we just literally this year signed a 99-year lease with NASA Ames down at Moffett Field. So we're taking over a chunk of Moffett Field, and they have giant wind tunnels and all these things for aerospace engineering. And so we're setting up our aerospace engineering research center and industrial engagement center for aerospace down there at Moffett Field. And so I think that's one of the reasons why, even though it's the very first class we've accepted, people have already heard about this, and that's why we're ranked 16th already. And then, so I think you removed it, but I saw a little bit of the question where dual degrees. So currently as a transfer student, you're not allowed to transfer into joint or dual degrees or any of these types of things, but turns out it's okay. We have reworked the curriculum. So there's a couple things. One, it used to be that you were expected to graduate in 4 semesters. Now, as a transfer student, you automatically get a 5th semester. So that has eased a lot of the stress for transfer students. So we made that automatic. Second, every department has gone through and redone their curriculum. And they've redone their curriculum in a way that frees up courses. And so, like for material science, we effectively went from having 1 elective class to having 5. Right. And so one of the 5 is a elective engineering course. The other 4 are completely up to you as long as they're upper division. So if you wanted to major in material science and you wanted to do a lot about entrepreneurship, those 4 classes you could take at the Haas Business School, you could take at the Entrepreneurship Center here in the College of Engineering, right? Hell, if you wanted to take 4 classes in history, you could do that. But essentially, right, if you're careful in your course selection, right, you could essentially do the dual major with those 5 elective classes. So if you really wanted to do something like that, you know, the folks at Engineering Student Services or somebody like myself who's on the undergraduate curriculum committee could help you design that and figure out what would be the best path forward for you. So yeah, all of the curriculum has been opened up to give our students maximum flexibility because of things like entrepreneurship. More and more students want that. More and more students want data science, access to data science classes. So maybe you want to come in and do, I'll just say material science, but mechanical engineering, bioengineering, but you want to do some data science stuff. So just Monday, we had Connor Landgraf, who graduated from bioengineering, owns his own company that does essentially data science, right? Machine learning, artificial intelligence on patient monitoring of hearts and breathing and all these types of things. And so maybe you want to do that. Well, all of a sudden now you've got 4 classes that you can focus on to do that and gain that experience that you would like. And that looks like all the questions. If there are no more questions, my email was in the chat. And so, you know, feel free to send me an email. And yeah, have a great day and enjoy the rest of your week.
I think my camera stopped working, but I'm here.
Oh.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sherburne. We appreciate it. And thank you to everyone who joined us today. There we go.
Oh, yeah, there we go.
Something new every year, and I really appreciate your honesty and your candidness, and I'm sure our attendees did too. So I hope you have a great afternoon. Have a great afternoon, everyone, and we will see you next week for our next webinar. Take care.
Justin, as long as the classes don't need to be taken for, Justin, okay, so most engineering departments don't offer engineering classes in the summer. That's because most faculty want to do research in the summer. So we don't teach in the summer, so we can do research and work with our students.
And a lot of our students want to go
right, and internships and study abroad opportunities and research opportunities, and so yeah,
which is why the 5th semester is so helpful.
Yes, exactly. All right, everybody, I'm gonna run. Somebody's knocking at my door.
Take care. Bye, everyone.
Bye.